I am proud to say I'm joined by the head of fighter operations for PFL Europe, who have a huge weekend this weekend in Newcastle, starting off their European series. And of course, you all probably know him better as the UK MMA legend and former welterweight title contender, Dan Hardy. Dan, how are you? Massive, massive week at UFC London. I have to say, it almost looked like you were enjoying yourself during Veronica's fight there, which opened the card. That head kick at the end, I saw you so animated. It was a beautiful moment. Tell me how that felt.
It felt really good. It felt really good, especially because we'd had such a good training camp and all the things that we drilled, I was seeing in the fight, the movement and the timing, drawing her onto punches. And then, body kick in the second round, head kick in the third is exactly what we talked about. It was just a well-rounded performance. It was amazing. It was a pleasure to watch from the corner. A lot less pressure than a lot of my teammates in the past, and certainly my own fights. That's for sure. It was really enjoyable to watch.
You particularly got excited at that head kick. What was there, like 15 seconds left in the fight? I think she throws a beautiful head kick. And at that stage, I think you're comfortable enough. Like, I don't think this one is going to get away from us. Is that a particular highlight for you, that moment? Because it was great to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because the nice thing about it is that I was calling for it as she was throwing it, so it was like the training worked. Like we had the same thought at the same moment. He turned her off the fence with a left hook, and as Miller started to turn and walk towards her, it was just the perfect time. She was kind of marching. She was running out of time. She was frustrated, and as I was saying, head, it was already on its way. So as I shouted kick, you heard that lovely flapping sound as it landed. It was beautiful, really good. I was amazed that she walked through it, to be honest, because I've been caught with that kick a few times in training camp, and I had to sit down.
I'm not gonna lie to you. When I saw the betting lines for that fight, I said a lot of my friends. I was like, that is crazy, right? That Veronica is 3-1 here. I was like, I'm not look, I think that's crazy. I kind of gave them that hint, but the way she fought, I mean, levels like clearly on display. I'm sure you knew that this could happen, but I mean, do you think the UFC were like, oh, like we did not expect this? Like, when for such a long time out, she looked like she's completely changed as a fighter. It's incredible, really. Like, were you nervous, or is that exactly what you expected on the night? Like a kind of a demolition job, so to speak.
I expected it to be a completely dominant fight. Yeah, I know what she's capable of, and the thing is, like, because of her record in the UFC, people don't look at her as the fighter that she is. I know that she's got all the technical skills. It was just a case of putting the pieces in order, and they weren't going in the right order in previous fights. And for a variety of other reasons, traveling around and not preparing properly, and we've just not really seen the proper version of Veronica yet, and that was a glimpse of it. And this is the reason why we kept a lid on everything during training camp. Normally I would be uploading videos to my Instagram, but I didn't want anybody to see anything. First of all, because I thought if they see how hard she's kicking, she'll pull out of the fight. That was a genuine concern of mine. So now people have seen a little glimpse, but we didn't show too much. There's still a lot more in a game that people haven't seen yet, and it's it was nice to watch her go out there and perform, because the only real question was 3 years out. It's a long time. Fights
Yes.
at the O2 Arena. There's a lot of emotion associated with that, but she just handled it so well. But by the time we got to the octagon, and I saw her take a deep breath and smile when Bruce Buffer was calling her name, I knew she had it under control, and I was happy to sit back and watch it play out.
I found it hard to believe. I think they said in the broadcast that was the first time you've been in a corner in 10 years. Was it something like that? They
Yeah.
said it in a UFC corner, sorry, but particularly a UFC corner. Is that accurate? Just find that hard to believe, because I feel like a Swiss Army knife. I see it everywhere doing all types of roles at every event I go to nearly. Like, I found that quite surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I don't corner a great deal anymore, to be honest. I did a while back when I was fighting a lot more, but the last time I cornered was Mac Danzig, and I'm pretty sure it was when he fought Matt Wyman, which was the UFC said it on the broadcast. It was like UFC 115 or something like that. But the reason why I was in his corner was because I was there most of the time for training camp. I was driving out from LA. I was driving out to LA from Vegas and sleeping on his sofa and spending all week with him. And you know, because I felt so involved in that training camp, I felt it was right to be in the corner. But previous times when I've helped people out and they've been going into the UFC, of course I've been either commentating or I've been busy or I've just not felt involved enough in their training camp. But obviously with Veronica, I was with her every day. And then I had Jimmy Warled next to me, who's an amazing fighter and coach. And then Jack Young as well, who's a name that people will be hearing a lot more of. So Jack and Joe Young were training partners and coaches of Veronica. And I felt so comfortable in that corner that really they didn't need me there. It was nice to be there though, as it was to be cornering Mac Danzig about 150 years ago. But maybe there'll be a few more of me in the corner from now on.
Your passion for the sport seems to like I never went, wow, look how jaded Dan is or anything when I've seen you. But this whole situation last week happening and now this segueing into this PFL, the first of their season in Europe, it just feels like there's a new level here. There's new juices flowing for Dan Hardy. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, when we came back from Brasilia after Veronica's last fight, we went straight into the pandemic. The next event was the London event that was cancelled. So we kind of, we had a few months to kind of recover from what we'd been doing, the fight and the traveling. And, we built a load of Lego and we just kind of hung out for a bit and both needed some recovery. And then work started. I was back and forth to Fight Island a couple of times, but the time that we were at home, we were talking about fights, watching fights, drilling, and it was just a good time to kind of grow. And I knew it, as soon as I was fired, I knew if I was just patient and I stuck to my guns and I held my ground, I knew that a good opportunity would come my way. And I was coaching and training and doing the YouTube channel and a few other bits and pieces here and there. But this is the job for me now. PFL Europe, director of fighter operations, allows me to do something positive in Europe for the fighters that are coming through. And ultimately, that's all I've wanted to ever do. Whether it was a coach or a commentator or whatever. Now, this is a position where I can actively scout the talent that I want on the roster. I can sign them, I can help them and guide them through their career. Hope I can match them well with other opponents that are on a similar trajectory, and then just genuinely find out who's the best in Europe, so we can pass them on to the global championships. It's a real privilege to be able to be in this position, and this weekend, of course, PFL Europe won. It's a big deal for us. We're looking forward to it a lot.
I want to talk to you about that, Car, but I think you said something very important there. A lot of people sign talent. A lot of people sign talent. They get great young prospects and they put them on a roster. But what you've said there is you've mentioned matchmaking. I think that's lost on a lot of people, the art of matchmaking. We've seen Ian Dean, right, do it for years with Cage Warriors, but that slow, consistent build. Whereas not just like, putting a guy or a girl against unknown people and then suddenly they're into contention. It does nothing for them. It's just like throwing them off the side of a cliff, I sometimes say. But I love that you said that. Like, I mean, do you feel like that's something that is maybe overlooked by a lot of people? They get the talent and maybe don't nurture it.
I just don't feel like promotions feel like that's their responsibility when really it is, especially if you're aiming to be towards the top of the sport. There's no like when you sign with an organization like Bellator or the UFC, they're not like they're not kind of assisting you through your career. You're left to your own devices. There are things that are on offer that would help. Obviously with the Performance Institute with nutrition and stuff, that's a big step forward that the UFC have taken. But there are a lot of facets to mixed martial arts where fighters feel like they're walking in the dark and they've no one they can ask. Um, I want to be a person within the PFL that is not only going to find the right talent to bring it in, but also to let that talent know that once it's part of the PFL, if there's something I can help them with, to let me know. I'm always going to try and match people fairly because I feel like that's how we get the best out of these fighters. And you mentioned the man, Ian Dean. The way that he matches fighters together has always been amazing. When I was researching Cage Warriors cards, I always thought to myself, this is a genius bit of matchmaking because I can see what he's trying to find in both of the fighters. I know that he needs to see takedown defense out of this person. I know that he needs to see more aggression out of this person. So he puts them together to try and instigate that in at least one of them. And if you get it in both, then you get an even more amazing fight. But it's very, very clever matchmaking, and no one's getting easy paths. There are no easy fights for anybody. I mean, look at Luke Riley coming up at Manchester at the weekend.
Absolutely.
He's fighting another undefeated fighter. That I don't like to see undefeateds fighting each other over and over again, but you need that test sometimes, and sometimes people are undefeated because they've not been fighting the right people. So we need to test that sometimes as well. And I think we're doing that this weekend with PFL. I mean, Dakota and Simeon have not got easy opponents, and they're the stars of the show.
Yeah, I love the fact that this is obviously in the UK, and you do have particularly three people I'm looking forward to. You mentioned Simeon and Dakota. You've also got McGrillen there, who I have known through being a bit of a social media sensation. I mean, I saw Kane Musa and other guys talking about him maybe a couple of years ago, and there is something so captivating about this kid. You know, he's just raw. Like, you know, when a dude is raw, and you're like, yeah, I would fancy him against Francis Ngannou if they fought. It's just because of his tenacity. Like, the guy is fierce. He has an exciting style. I mean, tell me, you mentioned Simeon and Dakota. What is exciting about those three? I saw you mention Lewis too in the proper picks online. That's a cool thing you guys are doing online with Proper 12. Tell me what's exciting about those three in particular for you.
Well, I mean, if we start with the co-main event, Dakota, the skills that she's got from Muay Thai is incredible. The fact that her mum was a world champion as well, and the fact that she trains with her brothers. I like the fact that she's in the gym all the time with family. It's a family affair. It means that she's dedicated to it all the time, and it shows in her skills. She's improving very quickly. The other thing is she's huge for flyweight. She's 5'10". She's got really broad shoulders. She's got a long reach. She's got great elbows and knees that we've not really seen a great deal of yet in mixed martial arts. I expect to see so much more. She's just, she's mature. She's got composure. She's undefeated, of course, 7-0. I expect big things from Dakota. But Malin Hermansson, she's a Swedish national boxing champion. She's tough. She's got hands down. Just not an easy fight. It's a real tough test that will be a challenge for her. And then, Simeon's got Muhammad Amin, who's been, training with Masasi, training with René Derrida. He's a great kickboxer in his own right. He's only a 1 inch shorter than Simeon Powell, which is really a big advantage that he has over most people being 6'5". And we're going to measure them again today, but Simeon's reach is 85 inches. And if
Wow.
you consider John Jones is 84, 84 and a half, and so is Stefan Struve, like he might have the longest reach in the light heavyweight division. So we need to double check that today. But again, 7-0. He's a young kid. He's training under Brad Pickett, Ash Grimshaw. He's just in a really strong place. And I feel like he's going to go from strength to strength. Now he's realizing where he is and what he's got in front of him. And then Lewis McGrillen. I mean, every time he touches somebody with a clean punch, they just fall over asleep. It's a supernatural kind of power that he's got, and we don't see it very often, especially in the lighter guys. You
Yes.
look at Ngannou, as you mentioned, and you're like, well, it makes sense that he takes people's heads off. But you look at McGrillen when he touches people, it's a bit like John Lineker. His power doesn't equate to his frame. And there is a rawness, a viciousness to him, which I think is going to be very appealing to a lot of the fans because everyone likes a wild man in there. But this
Yes.
kid's again undefeated. He had a good amateur record as well. He knows how to put his strikes together to put people away. And I think PFL can build him into something quite special as well.
I mean, talking about Simeon, Dakota, and maybe Lewis too in the future. These are the kind of fighters that UFC are usually signing. Like, this is what I'm looking at the card: a 7-0, 205 pounder. Like, guys are getting signed at 4-0 to the UFC if they're from the US, right? Like, guys who are in that weight class. There's so few of them guys. So I think that's great. And the thing I really like about them is those three in particular, they are PFL properties. They haven't been seen anywhere else. We're not taking something from Cage Warriors and putting it in here. We're not taking from Bellator and putting it in here. These are uniquely PFL fighters. I've got to ask you, because you have 4 dates in Europe this year, and obviously, as I said, great UK talent on this card. Obviously, a lot of people wondering if the PFL come to Germany, if they come to Dublin, are we going to be tapping into the markets there? Now, I know you have some signings in them part of those next to the woods already, but is that something you're tasking yourself with? I know there might not be a lot of room given the tournament style of this, but is that something you're hoping to do? Bring in more talent from those areas so when you drop in there, you have people that relate to the crowds there?
Absolutely, yeah. The undercard slots on these events are all going to be local talent. I want to make sure that we're giving people an opportunity to step into the PFL cage before next year starts. So you've got to keep an eye on these people that are going to be on these cards. Lewis McGrillen being one of them. We're going to have a couple of local fighters on the Berlin card. I've already got people in mind for Paris and for Dublin. Of course, Nate Kelly. I mean, it would be crazy to not have him on the card after he won the other week with a beautiful first round finish. Like it's just a case of kind of going into these regions and seeing who's about and who's ready to make that step onto the PFL. And as you said, with the talent that we've talked about with Dakota, Simeon, and Lewis, they are PFL talent. We've not seen them anywhere else really. So I'm going to try and keep that theme. There's a few more fighters that I want to sign that are either just about to make their pro debut or they're maybe 1, 2 fights into their pro career. So they can find a foothold in PFL and they can grow into their place on the roster. And as we come, especially Dublin, like Dublin is going to be a wild card because it's the finals, but there'll be plenty of space on the undercard to stack it with some local talent. I want some grudge matches. I want some, couple of amateurs turning pro that are both got lots of promise that face each other in their pro debut. I've got lots of plans, but it's going to be new talent that people won't necessarily have seen, or talent that's ready to make its pro debut. Because I mean, you've seen from IMAF, there's so much talent.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, over in Ireland, you've got McGregor supporting the team. The Irish team always do really well. We had 17 go to the championships from England. There's talent out there that's ready to turn pro. And these undercard spots on these European championships are going to be where we can showcase them and give them that opportunity to have a run out on a big show in front of their friends and family.
Yeah, now a lot of people are buzzing for a lot of talk around the Dublin card here in December. And one thing I have to say, because look, everybody blows me up every time Bellator come to Dublin. Every other coach in Ireland, like this is an Irish MMA. This is just an SBG card. Why isn't there this guy? Why isn't this guy? Why isn't this guy? And then I feel like the negative Nancy having to bring it up all the time because obviously you want to represent what the scene is saying when people are blowing you up and giving out stink about these different things. I wonder, a lot of people have seen, I think about 3 out of 4 of the guys from Ireland that you've signed are SBG. Where like I know you know all about Rhino, Chris Fields' Team KF, FAI who produced Paul Hughes, Joe McColgan. Like, are these other gyms you'd like to get involved too if you can? Obviously, I know it's a long time away. I don't want to be shoving words into your mouth, but is that something you're looking to explore? The rest of the scene as well as SBG, who are obviously the best known gym from the island.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I'll be tapping into experts like yourself. You know the region far better than me. I've already spoken to Chris Fields and a couple of the other gyms, but yeah, absolutely. I want to know what fights you guys want to see. The thing is, the Irish crowd are always just incredible when they come out, and the reaction that they got on the McGregor Brandao event, it was you were there. It was unreal. If we can create some atmospheres like that, and it doesn't need to be Conor McGregor. Paddy Houlihan was a superstar that night. Cathal Pendred was a superstar that night. It's about giving these fighters an opportunity to perform, and I'm not bothered what gym they're from, as long as they're talented and dedicated and they come to fight. Then there'll be a place for them on the PFL roster. And like I said, I'll be tapping you up, Pete. You can give me a hand finding these stars.
Everybody be giving out to me now if the card's bad, Dan. It's all Dan, nothing to do with me.
No
But
pressure, no pressure, mate.
the I guess I would like to ask you, what is your end goal? I think we're all trying to define the identity of Bellator in Europe. Cage Warriors obviously long established here in the UK and Ireland, and Bellator and Cage Warriors have had a bit of head banging online, etc. Different guys going back and forth. I know you're a very cool customer, but I mean, when you come in and take a job like this, I can't imagine you're the type of guy to go, yeah, we're happy enough just being the third best promotion in these European parts. I mean, obviously, I know there's KSW, Octagon, there's lots of other people there, but what is your goal for PFL Europe? What do you want to establish? And what did you want to do when you took this job?
I want to bring some stability to the region. All the shows that you mentioned are great shows. Cage Warriors has always been a fantastic platform, plus 100 UFC fighters now coming from Cage Warriors. We had successful fighters at the weekend that were Cage Warriors fighters and champions. And, you can't knock what they've done. Same thing goes with KSW and Octagon and Aries and, all the other shows that are consistent. Even the UFC comes back to the UFC, the UK once or twice a year, and we know that consistency because, well, March it's UFC London, but that's once a year where you can guarantee that event's going to be there, or almost guarantee. I want to bring some stability to this region where you're going to get 10, 12 shows a year in Europe with all the European talent on the PFL roster, and you know what they're aiming for, right? The goal is to get to the end of the year where they win the championships, they take that six-figure contract, and they move on to the global championships. Like, it's stability. That's the problem that we've always had in Europe is you can be in training camp for 12 months and be offered 15 fights and not one of them comes together, right? I mean,
Mm.
you probably hear it as much as I do from the young fighters. There are guys that have been, oh yeah, I've had one fight in the last 12 months, but I've been promised four. And it's just frustrating. If you're a young fighter, which believe it or not, I once was, it was difficult to get fights. It was difficult to stay active. And now I have the opportunity to bring bring stability and consistency to a region that has been lacking it for a long time. And, the PFL is a different thing to all these other organizations. Like every single one of these organizations serves its place, but they do one show and then one show and then one show. The purpose of the PFL having several shows in Europe is so you get the narrative moving through. You get the quarterfinals, the semifinals, the finals. Then you get all of the undercard fighters moving through that are going to be stars for the following year. We're going to be adding divisions as well, weight classes. We were already talking last night about, the 2024 weight classes and who we're going to bring in because again, like there's just too much talent in Europe to have 4 weight classes. We need all of them eventually. We need 12 shows a year at least to make sure we've got a house for all these fighters. It's a big job, but we'll build into Europe and then we're looking at other regions as well, Middle East and South America and Latin America and Asia, Australasia. PFL is going to grow very quickly. And this European model is the first time we're running this regional league out. But eventually, the regional leagues around the world will be the feeder show to the World Championships. So the narrative will become broader and more accessible to everybody as we go along. Europe's just the first test, and that's why the pressure's on me a little bit.
First week on the job and already a vision outlined like that. That is incredible, man. I am excited by what you're saying. That is incredible. And to be honest, even the fact that you guys are talking about next year already is very promising to me because look, how many times have we seen promotions dip in and then we don't see them for 5 years, until something picks up or McGregor comes along or something like that. I think that's all so promising to hear, Dan. I need to ask you one question. And there's just too many crossovers for me to avoid asking this question. It's to do with Colby Covington and the Jon Anik situation. I'm sure you've seen it. It's been big online. Colby Covington essentially threatening a staff member of the UFC quite publicly, saying, your kids, etc. A lot of personal stuff there. And I know obviously you had the situation with the UFC, which was an argument with a staff member. And I feel like this is a very public situation where it's a lot bigger than an argument. It's a threat. And this is a guy that Dana White's pushing forward to be the next contender to the welterweight title. I guess I'm just wondering, do you expect any reprimands here for Colby Covington based on him saying this to a staff member?
No, I don't. I think it's a very case by case basis within the UFC. I probably wasn't making them as much money as Colby Covington is. And like Dana set the standard on New Year's Eve, didn't he? Like you can't berate a member of your roster after you're behaving like that on camera. It's very, very Dana's put himself in a difficult position, and the UFC have put Dana in a difficult position. And I just feel like my concern is that the UFC is such a big player within the sport of mixed martial arts that it would damage the actual sport instead of just damaging the UFC. If it was just doing damage to itself, I'd be upset, but I'd be a little bit more forgiving. But I just feel like we've got a couple of people at the top right now that are running an organization that has too much influence on the whole sport, and they're not doing it in a very good job. And Colby's going to be Colby, and if he gets away with it, like he did when he threw that boomerang at the Doom, you know what I mean? It's like it's just how he acts. It's not a good standard to uphold. And I think the reason he'll get away with it, of course, is because Anik is another public figure. Like we had the bit of a back and forth between Gaethje and Bisping, and I think as long as both people in the organization are public facing figures, I don't think it's that much of a problem in Dana's eyes. But I had a very, very minor disagreement with a member of staff, and I was banned from all fight week activity last week. So, it's case by case basis. Yeah, it was. I went to the official weigh-ins. That was the only thing I went to though. But everything else I was banned from. And it's just, it's silliness. It's massive, massive double standards, But I wouldn't expect anything less from that organization these days.
I'm really sorry to hear that. I was hoping that it was kind of, let's call bygones be bygones when you're in a corner. Obviously, like very professional. Always have known you to be very professional in those regards. And even I can remember when they had the Legends Roundtable. And look, those guys are legends. There's no doubt about it. But people were texting me like, Dan Hardy should be here. Like, come on. And I was like, come on. They know he's a legend. Like it's obviously the situation. So, I mean, despite Veronica's amazing win, and I know you'd never take anything away from that was obviously a joyous moment for you. Was it a bit of a rough week in your first week back for the UFC, or did you just kind of put that behind you and move forward and get on with the task at hand?
Honestly, it was a really cathartic week for me. In my head, because I expected them to cause as many problems for me and for Veronica as they could, and it was a relatively smooth sailing week. I just stayed out of the way, as I did when I was working for them. To be honest, I was never down hanging out at breakfast and having conversations with people. I was always hiding in my room. I'm quite antisocial when I'm researching. It was quite a cathartic week. I was around a lot of people that were friends of mine that I'd worked with for a long time. I teased a lot of them about PowerSlap and got the same reaction from all of them. It's
The power
depressing to
slap
be
stuff was
around it, to be
ace.
honest.
The power slap stuff was absolutely amazing. I've never seen someone put it into such a beautiful nutshell. I don't want to ask you again because it's already perfect what you've done online, but fantastic. Were they looking at you strange after you've said all this power slap stuff? Were they pushing you into the distance?
No, unfortunately not. The majority of people within the organization can't stand it either, but they just don't feel like they have a choice. It's very much Putin's Russia in the UFC right now, and like it's depressing to see all these people that are usually really enthusiastic about mixed martial arts that are carrying this weight of this ridiculous circus of power slap on their side. As I said, it was a very cathartic week. The more time I spent around it, the more I spoke to people I used to work with, the more I realized I just don't belong there anymore. I don't know as I ever did. I did as best a job as I could, but I don't know. I'm just the company's been rotting from the inside for a long while, and now the rot's starting to show on the outside. And I couldn't have abided power slap anyway. I'm only interested in the UFC for Veronica's sake now. I'll go there and I'll corner and coach and I'll talk about the fights with the fans. But as far as the actual organization goes, it's always going to be at arm's length for me, especially while Dana's at the helm, because I just feel like he's going to do more damage, than anything else these days. He's overstayed his welcome. Absolutely.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. And I was thinking before you got on this call, wouldn't it be so bittersweet for the UFC if Dan Hardy ends up being the big thorn in their side in his new role with the PFL? And based on everything you've outlined there to me, I am very excited. I can't wait to see this first event, and I can't wait to see what you do over the course of this first year. I'm very excited for you, and I'm very excited for the PFL to have you on the team. So thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, mate. Always good talking to you.
All the best. If you like what you saw today, make sure you're following and subscribing us across all of the platforms. We have much more in store for you, and we can't wait for you to see it.